Hello, everyone. Good afternoon across the US, Canada. Good evening in Europe, and good morning in Australia. Welcome to our second ever episode of Just a Sec. This is our monthly live stream for those who are joining us for the first time. It is a really fun, captivating, and unfiltered format with our speakers. So there'll be a lot of interesting discussion today about some of our topics. We dive into real-world incidents, breaches, intel, and some of the top news stories that have come across our desk over the last handful of weeks. So with that, I'm going to bring over our speakers, and I'm just going to do a quick introduction. So 1 second. I'm going to add you guys to the stage. Good afternoon. How are you guys? Hello. All right.
Still
so
awake.
to do some quick introductions, still awake. Yeah. We've got, for those who didn't join last week, I'll just introduce their little interests as well. So first off, we've got Dr. Dre, who runs our global incident readiness and response here at Sentinel-1. She's a proud Orlandonian. I got it right this week. She's a functional amusaholic and best friends with princesses, wizards, and a mouse, and spends almost every day with them. We also have Dakota Carey, who spends most of his time researching how China's government aims to improve their offensive hacking capabilities. When he's not working, he's playing the theme song of the Great British Bake Off over and over in his head like it's elevator music. Welcome, Dakota. We have Jags, has a long history in tracking cyber espionage groups and targeted attacks, analyzing malware, and writing long, dense papers that nobody still reads. And more recently, he's become obsessed with AI and won't shut the bleep up about it. Just reconfirming there's no bleeper for you, Jags.
Thank you.
And Steve, our Vice President of Threat Response and Discovery. His threat work spans both public and private sector. His passions are the Chicago Cubs, being up 3 games in the NL Central. I'm not a baseball fan, so I'm sure if you are, you know what that means. And watching trailers.
Baseball, that's what that means.
Okay. And as you can see, he's the TV VCR repair guy. So if you need some help, give him a call. All right, guys, we're going to jump straight into it. And I'm going to pass over to you, Steve. So for everyone who didn't join our last stream, we run this in 2 segments. So our first segment is our master topic of the month, which is typically like a big news story that the guys will break down for you. The second half of our show, we put our speakers on the clock, and we have a countdown timer with a number of topics that we run through rapid fire discussion. So to start us on our master topic for episode 2, we are going to break down the $20 million bounty that Coinbase put out on its attackers. And so, Steve, this is I guess a new way of approaching this problem. Do you think it's going to work? What's going to happen next? Throw it to you.
Yeah, this is probably one of my favorite stories of the last few weeks. I mean, for folks who may not have been following it, what you effectively have is Coinbase received an extortion demand for $20 million. They played the reverse Uno card and said, actually, we'll offer a $20 million bounty to anyone that can help identify the attackers and have that lead to arrest and a successful prosecution. So this is fairly unheralded. We have never seen a private company offer a bounty on a cyber intruder before. So I love this topic because, first of all, I love when the cybers do something that has been going on in the real world for hundreds and hundreds of years for the first time. So I think that's pretty interesting. Like, do bounties even work at all? Little less in this space. And then, we've talked about hackback. We've talked about offensive cyber. We've talked about different governments providing indictments against individuals. This is a private company offering up a straight up bounty to identify people. So I'm just curious, does anybody think this is going to work?
I'm going to go with yes.
Really? We got a yes?
Yeah, I'm going to go with yes. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is people can't shut up about what they do. And that's almost a guarantee. And the second part of that is you have very low trust systems and groups of people who are conducting these attacks and interacting with one another. And a $20 million defection fee, if paid out anonymously, could make a lot of people in that ecosystem really happy.
I think they messed up on the part where it's like, this is going to help lead to a prosecution, because that like when you set that asterisk there, which in cyber is like, it is a high bar. I think that kind of signals to the kind of people that would know about this stuff that it's not a straightforward, like, here's your, like, there's a bag of cash in a McDonald's bathroom on I-95, right? Like, which is kind of what you need for people to just kind of,
That's a good point.
what they know. I do love the idea in the sense of, flipping the dynamics up. I would love to see something like this work, but the first thing that comes to mind is like rewards for justice, which is like the gov version of this. And that's been a disaster. Well, I think it's a disaster because frankly, there's never been a serious attempt by the US government, as far as we know, to actually pay anyone anything. So it almost like kind of gives this sense of like hollowness, like they're going to give you a bag of cash and like you pull out the first couple of bills and the rest is just like stuffed newspaper, like just kind of crumpled up.
Cold cash.
Yeah.
Cold cash.
Yeah. So I think we kind of we almost need Coinbase to make good on this, like to almost go above and beyond to try to pay people just to give a sense of legitimacy to this one, because the government has found a way to just make it seem like a scam.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, it's sort of like insurance, right? Like, oh, we'll pay you $20 million, but only if we achieve all of these things. And I mean, and that's how they're protecting themselves and having it make sense. Like, let's be honest, they're not here to just kick out $20 million. Obviously, they want like everything they want. But I think that, the folks that might have the information they desire aren't really trying to play that game, because to your point, Jags, then you start talking about prosecution, you're talking about court, you're talking about discovery, you're talking about what, like the witness protection program. I mean, like where do we draw the line for like where that comfort needs to be, even for something like $20 million, which is certainly compelling.
It kind of sucks because it's like of all places, like you would think Coinbase, which deals in like magical crypto money, like bullshit fake money. Sorry, bleep me. That they would kind of find a creative way to give this money in some capacity, and the fact that, I mean, we're all corporate, right? Like you can't actually have them just sort of give money to whomever. It might be a sanctioned entity, but it's less gloves off than you would expect, right? Like if they just been like, look, we've got a bunch of small denomination bills here. Tell us what you know. No questions asked, and as long as it like checks out, like you've got your money held in escrow, whatever, like that would have been really cool. I don't know if anyone's rock and roll enough at this point in this space to be able to do that.
Right.
I was a little surprised. Like, I don't want to be like the corporate dude to put the suits on, but I was really blown away that a company has done this, because like this could go sideways like 14 different ways,
right,
and introduce some real corporate risks to Coinbase. So like I gotta give them props for being creative and either convincing everybody in the org or somebody high enough up to push the lawyers to do this, because it'll be interesting to see if this is a one of, or if this is the one of one situation.
It definitely could start a trend if it was successful, which is, I think, kind of like the spirit of what Jags is saying, is like, we need to see them actually like pay it forward, prove this point, because if the concept here is sound, like it sounds like a fairly great idea, but it's going to flop if we don't see, the proof in the pudding or whatever, which means we might have to like front end this a little bit so folks can trust.
At a minimum, even if they don't, if this is not successful this first go around, the pricing data in itself is really interesting. That like the number is 20 million.
Right.
For this particular company in this circumstance, that's what they're willing to put out. And that is significantly more than some government programs that seek to do the same thing.
Dakota, to be fair, it's effectively 420 million. Because they said that they would cover people successfully scammed by this up until the day they announced the bounty, up to, I believe, $400 million. They're like the calculus is there, and they basically said like, we're willing to cover this much, and they didn't even give it to you in like bullshit currency, right? Like they're talking fiat. So again, sorry.
Are they?
We'll get you your
what
own.
were you going to say?
Your own death.
Yeah, I need like
No, I just I'm like looking at my cash money jar of all the dollars I owe my children for my curse words, but yet somehow I'm getting through this, Jags.
look. Okay, my podcasting philosophy is well established at this point. I'm trying here. I was told this was going to be unfiltered.
I think your point about like the amount is pretty dead on too. Like, I mean, we're just talking monies. This is like Bin Laden money. This is like El Chapo bounty. Like, this is not like low level street dealer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think at a minimum, if it shows anything there, because there are other more persistent actors in this space, Rewards for Justice being a good example, where like the pricing data can provide political cover for putting additional funds into programs like that, where it's like, this is what this money is worth in the private sector. Like, this is what people will do for this level of funding. And to Jags, to your point, I'm not familiar with the program. I haven't seen any data on its performance, but if it is lackluster, to your point, and something like this succeeds, that provides a lot of U.S. government actors, the agency and the ammo to go to the people who approve these programs and say, capitalism works. We just have too low of a price.
Mm-hmm.
It will work. We just need to increase the incentive.
Did they say, and maybe I missed it because I was catching up, but like, did they say what currency they're paying the 20 million in? Is this like cash dollars or is this?
Yeah, can you choose your made up?
I'm pretty sure they
like,
said Cole's
funny
cash.
money.
Like, I hate to keep pressing that, but like I'm pretty sure it was Cole's cash.
Steve is really hoping for Cole's cash. He's got a whole
still
wardrobe
a
at
thing?
home. Just
I want it to be so bad.
No, Steve's like, I want to buy 5 Coles. Can I do that? Like,
yeah, you own all the Coles in the Midwest now. That's your bounty.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an interesting question I see popping up in chat here. I'm trying to like read it and talk at the same time, which is never great. But basically, like, what's legal cover that these vigilantes could have as they do this? So I'll tell you, having done law enforcement stuff with bounties before, this is ultra murky waters. Like this, there are not clean laws on this. It varies municipality by municipality. It varies by government. It varies by, frankly, how much a particular government actually cares and what they're willing to do. And there's all kinds of potential provisos around, let's say an individual goes and does some illegal things to acquire this information to then go claim this bounty and it leads to prosecution. There's lots of well-established laws around, like, you may or may not be able to use that based on how it's obtained, and you're back to jurisdictions again. And so I think this is just such an open-ended topic, and this question is just like one of 1,000 legally that pop up, because there is not a universal answer in the, I'll call it the real world. So it's going to be at least as murky in the cybers.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be quite so much like vigilantism, right? As much as it's what Dakota had mentioned before of like, you've got these like low trust distributed groups, which is really interesting. I think Max Smeets recently released his book Ransom War on this, and it's like there's like this trust paradox about sort of like the branding for the groups. So he's speaking about ransomware, but the other side of it is like these folks are coordinating on some Discord chat. They've never met each other before. You have trust, quote unquote, between partners that are doing this enterprise, but it's all pseudonymous, and in most cases you don't know each other. Otherwise, like we've seen it with the comm and Lapsus and so on, like they'll start doxing each other on these sites at random. So in a way, like, I think it's the right conditions for people will know stuff and they may be incentivized to tell stuff. I think the part you're missing is kind of being a little loose with the purse and saying, hey, like there's going to be money here. And we're not going to be that stringent about providing it if you actually give us good information. I think that's the part you're missing. And I don't know how you signal that properly without effectively getting to the same problem as the FBI opening a tip line. And then everyone lets you know how they saw the 9/11 hijackers like walking across the border in Vermont, and they're dead set that they ran into them in a McDonald's in Topeka. And you're like, God, like we have to field through all this.
Classic Topeka.
Classic. The usual.
All right, guys. Great first master topic, and thanks for popping your questions in the thread there. Keep them coming through. There's a couple more that we're going to answer in the back end just so we can get through the countdown timer. So I'm just going to bring this up. I'm going to put you guys on the clock for the second half of the show. So give me 1 second. Okay, so if anyone who's new, this is when it gets serious. Yeah, and can I just say, like, there was some. You did well, Jags. Like, there was only minor bleeping that we needed.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
know, you stroking your cat is quite iconic through the month.
It's just yeah,
it's great. All right. So we're going on the clock. Just a reminder, you got 2 minutes per topic, and you'll hear a nice fun horn when you need to change. So let's bring this up. We're going to start. The first one, Steve, you're going to kick us off with this. So DanaBot compromises themselves. Wins are wins. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, this is like one of my absolute favorite things in the entire world. I love when attackers just make mistakes. So DanaBot, we've had 16 individuals get tapped under indictment from the U.S. Department of Justice. And DOJ has said flat out, we found almost all of these individuals because they popped themselves with their own malware on their own boxes, and we were able to harvest all that. Which, like, if there's not an InfoSec lesson in that, I don't know what there is. But I just want to, like, honestly celebrate that. I love the easy wins. I love when the attackers give the easy wins.
Mm-hmm. Oh, 100%.
Does this fall under never get high on your own supply? Is that the rule that breaks if your malware is on your own box? Is that the...
This stuff happens all the time. It's not an outlier. You would be surprised. Like, anytime you get to see some like command and control boxes, especially if there's like key loggers or screen grabbers, it is routine for folks to, because it's part of the testing phase. You just don't think to go clean up, whatever's going on, whatever ends up in your command and control server, and then you get some folks, some geniuses who will even do that with like open web directories as the place where they're
open DIRs
putting
are the best.
their stuff, right? Open DIR. And then then there's like open DIRs, right? Like somebody mentioned this, the FAA here. Not everybody's living under such stringent and, like, frankly ridiculous laws. Not a lawyer, right? But there's not much keeping you when the command and control, the exfil is going somewhere with like the creds in the malware, for example, which was prevalent for many, many years. Seriously, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about developing a keylogger or like pushing this kind of malware that means that you have to infect yourself, but it always happens.
Yeah. Well, or you get the situations where, like, we'll have threat actors that'll install our own products. So obviously we all work here at SentinelOne, but they'll install EDR products, whether they're ours or someone else's, in an effort to like bypass like VPN hip checks or something. Like, they know it's a requirement for, especially like when there's no two-factor authentication in play. And what it winds up doing for us then is like giving us complete visibility into their endpoint. Like, we can see what they're doing, what they're developing, pull files from them. And, it's like, don't like to brag about it, but we got a lot of bad guys that way. So it's, something to think about.
The number of cybersecurity companies that have just like made hay out of like exactly what you're saying, Jags, like credentials coded in or just harvesting open DIRs or any of that. Like, people stop doing personal stuff on work computers. Like, that's the lesson, right?
I told you I had a new horn for you. We're moving on.
Cracked him up so much.
Is that a rubber ducky?
All right.
Yeah.
Topic 2 is LLM vulns. This is you, Jags. Talk us through. We've got some new discoveries for reals.
Yeah, so it's finally getting for realsies, and like we're sort of seeing a couple of different ways in which this is manifesting. But effectively, there's this awesome post by a researcher called Sean Heelan, brilliant guy. He discusses how effectively he was looking for, he had done some auditing of some open source code, and he found a vulnerability that he'd reported. And for a bit, it meant that he was the only person on earth that knew about this thing. So he goes and tests O3, the new OpenAI reasoning model, giving it the same context, etc., and basically trying to see if it could find the vuln, even though it obviously is not in his trained set. It would not know about this. And we start to get like some actual metrics around this, where it's like, hey, if you run it, if you give it this much, it takes this many tokens, it costs this much, you can run the LLM, 100 times, and 8 out of 100 times it's going to find this vulnerability, which is cool in and of itself. And then the O3 found its own vuln, its own CVE that Sean had not seen. So all of a sudden you're like, okay, now we're talking like O-Day discovery, right? And in a very legitimate sort of setting. So this has been discussed plenty as like a theoretical thing, like, oh, LLMs for sure. Now you're going to start having 0 days dropping out of the sky. But I think it's the first, like between this and Dave Vitale, OpenAI's Aardvark, it's the first time that we're like actually seeing it happen. So where do we go now, right? Like where does the sea of vulnerabilities take us now?
I think the big thing for me with all of this, like LLM vulns in particular, is if we look at any other piece of previously new technology, we found the first real intrusion well after it had already started. So if we're finding the vulns, like, isn't a good default assumption that like this stuff is already happening and we just have not discovered it as a community? Whoop, whoop.
I talked for too long. This doesn't work for us. Not at all.
All right, next topic, threat naming again. I feel like
God.
we've approached this a few times, guys. Where are we going with this?
All right, well, I'll take the first swing at that one. I'm an unabashed attribution nerd. Like, I am deeply passionate on this topic. So recently, Microsoft CrowdStrike announced that they had come together and had basically mapped out what some of their group names equal to each other. I'm personally real conflicted on this because I want to actively support any and all efforts on better community understanding of attribution. I also think this is actually one of the most confusing parts. So now we just have to learn two sets of names that mean a thing, and then we can like start describing what that thing actually is. So I would love to see a universal solution. I don't think that this is going to be it.
I can't be the one to speak on this one because there's no bleeping and no curse jar. So you guys, please, somebody say something.
I'm pretty much in agreement with you, Steve. I mean, attribution is obviously like, especially in my field, in my job, like one of the first things every customer ever wants, every victim ever wants. And maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but I look at like the naming conventions that CrowdStrike uses and Microsoft, and they're so wildly different that I'm like, how would you ever marry these two up in a way that would make sense? But, not trying to clown on anybody. I get it. Like maybe, it is a utopian perspective that we would all love to see someday. And I've sat in a lot of rooms with other industry professionals that are like, yeah, that would be great. But it's not been done. So we'll see. I'm here for it if it succeeds, but I'm pretty sure
it can't succeed. Sorry.
I love this one. Okay, next topic. DDoS. Biggest DDoS ever recently. Guys, do we care about DDoS anymore? Jags, I think
that's no, all Jags, go.
No, it's not me.
No, that was definitely me.
I would never bring a DDoS story. I would never bring a DDoS story to us.
Like, the recent news of like the largest DDoS ever, I think it was like 6 terabits of data per second, 10 times larger than the previous DDoS. I think the question is dead on. Like, does DDoS even, I hate to say doesn't matter anymore, but like as an institution, do we care about it? And if anything, I think it's actually we struggled so many times to find where the cybersecurity industry has like solved a big problem. I would actually submit DDoS as one of the big problems that has largely been solved. We just don't deal with DDoS impacts very often anymore.
Right. Yeah. I mean, look, credit to organizations like Cloudflare, right, and Google and a couple of other places that have just like, I think to Steve's point, right, like they've really nailed it. You could basically just get behind one of these services, and like 90% of DDoS, if not all DDoS, is effectively not an issue. I think it's interesting to hear it from like Brian Krebs, because like he got hit by one of the largest DDoS, and that was precisely the kind of situation where you're like, at what point, how much of a stress test can you put these systems through and these services through before they go, all right, buddy, take your blog somewhere else, right? So it's kind of cool to see that like we're at this point of resilience where that's not much of an issue. But I also think, like, what are you using this towards? Because you could take down actual internet infrastructure if you were like properly targeting this thing instead of. wasting it. God
Oh,
damn
this
the
one's gonna be
moderators.
This one's going to be contentious. French toast, is it the best breakfast meal? Good luck.
I think yes, right? We're done. We're moving on to the next
No,
What about
no,
breakfast
absolutely
tacos?
not. No,
thing. Oof.
breakfast tacos.
Who can
I
have that
get on
kind of
board with
sugar in the morning? I can't have
Breakfast
that kind of
burritos are
sugar in
pretty
the
great.
morning.
Mhm.
You gotta do
That's
sourdough. You do
Sourdough.
sourdough French toast. You got your little bit of bitter, your little bit of sweet. fills
Little
you
that
up.
how
bit
the
of
French do
sweet.
it? Can you
I'm
do that? Or is that
picturing a
new
pool
dish?
of syrup, right? Like, yeah.
I eat my
Wait, you
French
left
toast
hungry.
without syrup, just powdered sugar.
I've done that multiple times, especially like a little like nice whipped cream. Yum.
Don't say yogurt, Steve. It's over.
No, don't pass. Heart. You know what? I lived in Europe several times, and I really tried to do the local thing of the yogurt with granola for breakfast, and it just genuinely pissed me off every single time. Like I got genuinely angry, like I had wasted a meal.
Too much fiber.
It's just, like no
That's a
delicious.
loaded
Texture's
statement.
all wrong. Too much.
I just
fiber.
don't
We've
eat
all been there.
breakfast.
What?
No breakfast, man. No. I haven't eaten all day today. I'm waiting right now for these calls, this 7 hours of calls today to end so that I can eat something. So I appreciate this topic a great deal.
Breakfast rules.
You can have BFD
Okay.
breakfast for dinner, Jags.
No, absolutely not.
Brenner.
Dysregulates me, upsets me.
Okay, moving on.
Resist.
APT 31 and MFA. Dakota, this is you. Chechia should release reporting on technical artifacts. Take us through.
Yeah. So I'm first of all, thanks to the Czech Republic for putting out allegations that a specific organization had hacked specific victims within your government. But as somebody who has publicly criticized China for not being specific in their allegations and providing technical documentation, I unfortunately have to tell you that you should release more information when you make these claims about these intrusions. We all would benefit from it. And I just can't take the risk of losing my credibility by not asking you for more information. I've made too much of a big stink about it with China. They've gotten mad and written reports, as a rebuke of those claims. And so I just want to be consistent here in asking for additional documentation.
Any minute now, the Czech are just going to start just writing reports about Dakota as well, for calling their claims.
That's what the Chinese cybersecurity companies did in response. They said, no, we can back up these claims. And then they didn't. They didn't. 97 pages of
they
trash.
ripped off my work in the process of trying to mess with your work, which was hilarious. Hey, specific to this, right? Like, I don't think we've seen the Czech do this kind of thing before, which is it's interesting to see them kind of lean in. APT 31 has been around for a while. So it's I feel like this is like a rookie thing of not really leaning into providing folks with the indicators, but I'll say welcome to the party, Czech Republic. Glad you're here. There's no way this is the first time you've gotten popped by the Chinese. No chance in hell. I'm sure there's evidence in my computer without me even knowing that they've definitely gotten popped by the Chinese before. But it's cool that they're coming to play along, I guess, right?
Yeah, I'm glad to have them.
Dakota just likes getting on watch lists, so you're on another one now, my friend.
Anything that makes my travel a little bit more difficult.
All right, moving on. Jags, this is with you. Redefining initial access brokers, AABs, who are bleeping up the whole game. I can't read your statement on that one, so over to you, mate.
Damn. No, so I think this is a really cool piece by Cisco Talos folks, Ashley Chen, Vitor Ventura, a couple of other people. They talked about it at PivotCon, but essentially, they're approaching this from a methodological standpoint by saying, initial access brokers are basically their own groups. They have their own segment, tiers of groups that are doing this thing. You have your financial IAGs, state-sponsored IAGs, opportunistic IAGs, and that we should effectively, it's a very detailed, exposition about how we need to treat these folks as their own tier. I think it's an interesting evolution of what's going on. It's us catching up with something that's been going on for a bit, but I'm curious is it worth it? Are we there? Do we need a few more acronyms to throw at these guys, or like, do we just kind of keep skating by and say it's just, cookie stealers?
I mean, I'll kind of go back to the earlier attribution discussion. I think IABs in particular are like attribution worst case. Like, it is really problematic for just their communities are fluid. The entire purpose creates attribution challenges. So I think, as counterintuitive as that sounds, I think that is, I would argue that this is important. They do need their own categories. The more we understand them, the more we can actually peel apart and apply decision-making in intrusions. Yep. And also, I think this is one of those things where the better we get at this, the more we learn. We've been chasing IABs as a community forever, and chasing them is 0% fun. So I do think this is I would +1 this all the way.
Yeah, and I think. Oh, sorry, Dakota.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, we're starting to look, especially when anything as a service, which is, for several years now been, a large part of what we do. But you start looking at how law enforcement wants to start handling these sorts of threat actors, and they really want to look at it more like organized crime, and being able to take some of these specific parts of organized crime and giving them their own definition and their own category allows for it to kind of make sense in their minds, and then the minds of whatever defense that or litigation that might come from it. So I think it makes sense for the whole life cycle of what these things are, and then allows them kind of to be able to be treated as such.
Oh, that was great timing. Okay, last topic of the day. CISA and Microsoft 365 warning. So it was CISA warns of compromise of Commvault to get to your Microsoft 365 credentials. Steve, tell us all about it.
Yeah, so here's my takeaway without going through the whole CISA advisory. I think there's a really interesting thing there. While that intrusion they talked about was ultimately about targeting data, in particular systems that back up and store data to get M365 credentials, which sounds frankly kind of boring. We've been dealing with that forever. If I had to list the top 3 things that are the absolute Wild West, I would say data is number 1. And so I think anytime you see any intrusion set go after that for any reason, it's all there. It's all there. Whatever you want is in that type of technology. They just happen to want M365 credentials. So I do want to give a hat tip to CISA. I think this is, on the surface, this sounds like one of a many, but I actually do think this is different. I think this has long-term implications. And I think this is one of those things where we just don't talk about this enough as an industry.
Well, that's what happened with Cysense, if you remember recently. And Cysense was a particularly interesting one because we were at as a company, we were at step 0 of finding out that this was going on, helping to triage everybody else's and triaging our own. But you have these situations where a provider who, by the definition of what they provide, have all these credentials, API, secrets, all these keys to be able to access databases directly. And if they don't tell you, then you have this kind of a distributed breach, which is sort of very odd, right? They can hit a database here, they can hit a service that you have over there, they hit a Google BigQuery thing that you rely on some back end, and it's actually your testing software that effectively is leaking all these creds and abilities to access them. And I don't know about cloud administrators, but how do you notice that this has happened? In the M365 example, if Microsoft isn't monitoring, or they don't see it, or they don't tell you, as a cloud tenant, what can you expect?
Yeah, and I think too, again, we're just talking about an intrusion to grab valid access, which we've been talking about forever. Just imagine if that access was to these data repositories. This exact same thing would be what we'd be talking about. And this is what we wouldn't be on these podcasts. We'd be out working because it would shift the entire landscape. And the only difference is they just wanted M365 accounts versus accounts which give access to the entire data repository of an organization. That's a big deal.
All right, guys, you made it. Well done. Countdown clock is done. So we're going to move on to the Q&A section. We do have a couple of questions. So the first one, I'm not sure who wants to take this, but it loops back to our master topic. Maybe, Steve, you can kick us off. So the question was, should Coinbase release some early IOCs so that vigilantes have an initial lead to work on?
So I will give that a two-part answer. I think part one is I am 1000% pro dropping IOCs when you discuss something publicly. Like, just as a default setting, I struggle if you should drop those IOCs for the purpose of supporting vigilantes. Like, that's where I pulled a punch. You've got an intrusion that leveraged insiders, which is a huge risk to a bunch of organizations. Understanding what you can learn about that and apply at other entities, I think, is really important, even without the vigilante piece. Awkward.
I think what I would say is, like, I think it's the fact that we're using the term vigilantes. Like, they're looking for defectors, right? Like, I think it's saying vigilantes is like, hey, give us, let us know some passwords and whatnot, or like where we go and like break these guys' legs. And you're like, that's not what we're looking for. We were just hoping you would give us some names, right? Like, just names and addresses is fine.
I think that goes back to Vic's comments about Dog the Bounty Hunter. We're gonna need to get a wig. We're gonna start going out and putting folks in the trunks of cars. Maybe not.
Dog.
Can you guys all come with wigs next episode? Yeah.
If they start doing additional services for you, like kneecaps, you need to lower the price. You're paying for too much. Lower the bounty. You'll find the correct price point.
Where's the bundle? Give me the bundle.
I think
bundle and save.
The real problem here is if you are looking for someone on the internet to go kneecap someone for you, chances are you're talking to the people that pulled this off. I think that's the real issue, is you're wading into that dark pool, and I think it's all looking the same in there.
Okay, next question, Jags. We're going to kick this one over to you. Back to the threat naming discussion. I know you like this one. Why can't we have unified threat naming?
I've got to do this one without cursing. Okay, so look, the reality of it is, everyone has complained about the threat naming thing, and everybody hates it. But we're trying to solve a cosmetic problem in cosmetic. We're trying to solve a data problem in cosmetic terms. The problem is not the naming. The problem is essentially, when you're doing this kind of research, you are defining a threat cluster, a bucket that you're just like using to connect a bunch of indicators of compromise. And then you're renaming that bucket some term of art so that people can remember it. They know how to grok it. They can write about it. And then people focus on, well, why can't this name be the same as the other name? The real problem here, and like Reuters, I'm glad they took a bit of my quote for like skepticism's sake, but you kind of missed the substantive part of it, which is, unless we're saying that Microsoft and CrowdStrike and so on are willing to share the indicators that they use to define these buckets so that we can all compare and say, oh yeah, okay, our visibility conforms to the same thing, then this is all this is all bullshit, right? Like, unless you're willing to say, this is the bucket, this is the data that we're putting in there, what's your data? And like, you can, come up with some cryptographic implementation so that we're not just handing each other indicators, because people in this industry treat threat indicators as if they're intellectual property, which they're not. Then otherwise we're just lying to ourselves. And like Microsoft and CrowdStrike and so on, like, want a pat on the back for letting their analysts talk to each other. It's like, we've been doing that. Maybe you guys should be a little less antisocial and a little less like lawyered up and programmatic and just talk to each other. And then we don't need to issue a press release for this. And maybe we'd have some conformity. But even look at the past week, Microsoft renamed an actor that the Dutch AIVD, MIVD named Laundry Bear, just because it should fit into their freaking, it should fit into their naming convention. It has to be a Blizzard or whatever it is. Okay, right? Like, those are marketing problems that if the companies are creating themselves, and then they want to get a pat on the back for solving the problem they've created through an Excel spreadsheet. Get the fuck out of here. Sorry.
TSA pre-check has a lot of subscribers.
Bleep.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you. I told you not to put me on this topic.
All right, guys, we are at time.
Jags, you definitely
Yeah.
nailed it though. Like that is the real problem, is the fact that even within our industry, when we feel like we trust, we don't trust until we verify, right? And if you don't have the information required to verify, then how are you going to say, yeah, I agree that this person is, dancing bear on a storm cloud or whatever? You're not going to know.
Dancing bear
Cool.
on a storm.
I think that's a new, we might come up with that phrase somehow. Yeah, I like it. All right, guys, thank you very much. Steve, Jags, Dakota, Dr. Dreyer, awesome episode. We're looking forward to the next one already. So for those who are watching, our next episode will be on Thursday, July the 10th. So mark that in your calendars. Look out for our posts on LinkedIn and other social platforms. But for today, thank you guys. Much appreciated. And we'll see you next time. See you later.
See you in July, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.